Sweet. So we left off last time at a pretty ugly drawing, to say the least. But we went over a couple of the basics, right? We drew our lines in Rhino, we moved them to Illustrator, we changed their line weights, and then we simply just dragged and dropped those line weights into Photoshop, right? So that we could use them for what they are, and they can actually help guide us in Photoshop. Now, I was mentioning last time as well, you know, if you already made a hand drawing to this, right, or you drafted it, scan that in, forget Illustrator, right? You don't necessarily have to do every single process. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to draw it by hand, then also trace it digitally. Does that make sense, guys? I would kind of pick one or the other. It's either digitally traced or it's traced manually, right, and scanned in. But to further go over it, there are some pretty unique tools that we talked about, right? We were trying to make it look at least more realistic, more human, but we can change the color on a whim, right? I sometimes love and hate markers for this exact reason. I use the wrong marker and I'm like, crap, I gotta go with it, right? In Photoshop, that is definitely not the case, right? We can change the color on a whim. We can make it a black and white drawing even at the change of a button. So right off the bat, you know, my roads, you know, they looked good on Wednesday, but they honestly look pretty dark in the projector. So I want to lighten those up. I can do that very easily. I just click on Road, Image, Adjustments, and Brightness and Contrast. And there's actually a selection of tools here that are definitely my go-to, right? So Image, Adjustments. And if some of these are usually grayed out, it usually means you're in the wrong mode, right? So 8-bit, if 8-bit isn't working for you, 16-bit is definitely the best way to go. RGB color, but you know, just trying to make sure I cover all the bases. But I do want to lighten that road, so obviously brightness and contrast. It says I can't do it because the active layer is empty, right? So I might want to check that road, and it's absolutely right. I've got two different roads, so maybe get rid of that one, right? So the program is trying to help us out, at least to a certain extent. But again, brightness and contrast, of course it found that. And I kind of want to brighten it up. I want to make it, you know, I think it's pretty obvious it's a street, so I don't want to saturate this thing too much, right? Of course, I can add some contrast, but that kind of looks unrealistic. So actually, I'm going to scale back the contrast. That's looking a little bit better. Now, the green grass looks way too green. So again, I can go to Image, Adjustments. Brightness and contrast won't really help us here, but however, color balance or replacing a color can definitely help, right? In our case, I'm going to go with color balance. It's got 3 different types, so you can control the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights of that image. So in my case, if I wanted it to be more green, of course, you know, I can make the highlights more green, I can make them more purple. We can even sort of gray them out. After all, it just needs to be the interpretation of grass. So we can dial in the color is my point, right? If I wanted it to be a little bit less green, to take the midtones. And you might have to play around with the colors a little bit, you know, not the end of the world. Maybe a little stronger of a green. Change my shadow. Maybe that's a little darker. And again, just adjusting the colors, right? But it's just going to do it to that grass, and already that is starting to look a lot better. The next bit of information that I could put is definitely trees, right? Maybe I actually mentioned last time that these were kind of just our placeholders, right? So there's a number of information that we can gather. We can either trace them ourselves, we can either draw them ourselves and put them in there. I mean, there's a lot of things we can do, but at least one of the ways that I like to teach is, of course, you know, let's go to Google Images again. Probably the only time that I really like Google Images, but let's see. Trees, PNG, right? Maybe plan view. PNG is really important because, you know, I don't want to have to mess with, you know, kind of the background of these trees. I also want to select maybe a few that look at least somewhat similar. Oh wow, you know, I can even choose something that even looks architectural, right? This clear background is really important, and the way you can tell is when you drag it. If the background is also transparent, then usually it's a good sign. In this case, it looks like it's actually a fake, right? It's not. It's a real background. It's a real transparent background, but it's not actually transparent. So for instance, like I'll click on this guy, If I move it, again, a fake background. So you do have to be careful about, sort of which PNG actually is transparent. For instance, you guys see that one? It's awesome, right? I don't have to do a lot of the work, and I can drag it right into Photoshop. Now, it's not detrimental that it does have a background, but again, it just makes it easier, right? And of course, there's millions of places with all different kinds of trees. Don't have 100 different types of trees either, but also don't have the same tree, right? You want to trick the mind a little bit, but you don't also want to make it look like, oh my gosh, this person just went through a catalog of trees and pasted whatever, right? Unless the situation really is like that, but in more than cases than not, it's really not like that. So, like I say, a good rule is 3 or 4 trees. So in my case, I'll choose 3 or 4 trees. Those are actually looking pretty good. They're pretty realistic, so I might want to dial that back a little bit. After all, I don't want something super realistic that, there's too many things going on. However, these architectural ones are pretty nice. Those ones are pretty nice. Let's go with the architectural ones. That way I can at least show you how to remove that fake background. So again, open image in a new tab is the best way to kind of get just the image, right? And it's a pretty good quality image, and it's something that, I could even do and scan in, right? So we can show you 2 things in one stone, right? So save image as, I'll call it trees. Save it on my desktop, and import that. All right, so place embedded. And again, the reason I place embedded is so that file is in this file, right? Definitely not something to overlook. Grass, trees. So I could place that in there, however, I might have to remove one at a time. So actually, in this case, it might be a better idea to, well, first we have to press enter, but let's actually open that file on its own. That way we can save some trees out. So trees, JPEG, and we can go ahead and section some things off, right? For instance, I may not need that weird ugly tree right there, and that one's actually pretty ugly too, but these 3 are pretty good, right? And that one's pretty good because it looks a little different but the same tree, so that's pretty nice. A couple of ways we can get these out. Right, I can highlight over the ones that I do want to keep. Right, so I'll say I want to keep these 3. Actually, I'll keep these 4. That one looks nice. I like that one. I'll select the inverse, right, and erase the rest. That way I can at least focus on what I want to focus on. And I can even take them in one at a time once I fix them. So the next thing I could do is, well, don't get me wrong, we could trace it. Right? It wouldn't be the end of the world, and honestly it wouldn't be the first time I had to do this. Right? We could trace it, even abstractly. Close enough, right? To where we can just remove the white space, right? The blending options that we talked about last time. So don't get me wrong, this is something that we only have to do once, right? I can save these trees off for a later day, right? I can put a little folder that goes, here are all the trees that I've ever worked on, right? Now, I do have that myself, but I have it at home, and it wouldn't help you much if it didn't actually show you all these things, right? So we can select the inverse again, press erase. Obviously I want a smaller eraser, and I can get rid of it sort of strategically. So there's one way we can remove it, right? Another way is the magic wand tool, which is great, but it doesn't honestly always work, right? For instance, it actually got pretty close, right? It's trying, and it definitely probably recognizes the background. So yeah, that might be a good solution too. And let's just go ahead and use that solution for now. Magic wand tool seems to be working okay. Gotta love it. So those are looking pretty good. At least enough to where we can take them. So what I like to do is select one, right? So I need to deselect my other selection first, which is Command D as in dog, right? But I'll take this, copy it, so Command C, go over to my other file. Don't really need this trees file anymore. And I'll go ahead and paste it, right? So Command V as in Victor, right? And we'll paste it. I can do Command T to transform it, right? Like I said, these are kind of just my placeholders. Oh, accidentally did my selection tool. Oop. Nope, not that one. We're going to go ahead and lock that one actually, so we don't accidentally move it. We can press a little lock sign on any layer and make it to where it can't be movable, right? Photoshop has definitely gotten better at sort of being smart about the way you select an object. Of course, hold shift to keep things proportional, and I'm basically just trying to hide that little line that I created. I could always erase it too, but you know, that honestly looks better. I can paste a few of them, right, for sure. However, it seems to have a background on this one, right, and probably a background on that one as well. So what we need to do to the tree, blending options, right, and of course multiply. Check it out, right, now it actually has a transparent background. Right, so like I said, we're going to fill it in with a couple of trees. So we'll transform it up, we'll hold shift. And maybe one more of those. We'll have to do blending options again. We could also apply it to many of them and put them in a group. There it is, multiply. Command T to transform it. And again, we could always erase whatever falls off the page, right? It actually might look good in this case. Not too bad. Let's get the other trees. Let's get one of those. Oh, cancel. Deselect, select again. Take that one, command, paste. Blending options. And multiply. Let's put that one over there. Right click blending options and switch it to multiply instead of normal. That's looking pretty good. I like that there. I like when the trees kind of blend together real nicely like that, right? Let's do another one. Right click, blending options, and I'm just gonna put all these trees together, but I will do it one at a time just so that we can get kind of used to it. Because if I did it all in one swoop, I mean, it does look amazing, it does save a lot of time, but it doesn't really show you at least how to do it right now. Sometimes it's easier to work one at a time before you get really good at it. That's looking pretty good. Let's get another tree. I like that one. So we're not going to leave the tree like this either. That would be kind of plagiarism in a way. I mean, it's kind of weird that I'm taking somebody else's tree, right? So another thing is, well, we can change the color. We can make it actually a little bit our own. We can blur them out a little bit. We can add shade and shadow to them. So, I mean, we can make it our own, is always kind of my point, right? Let's take that tree, blending options, multiply, transform. And I guess, at least for now, we'll say that, you know, I finished all my trees, because I don't want to waste our time just kind of going through trees. But let's say I was done with my trees. So I do want to take all of those trees. In my case, it's just kind of these layers that I added in. So I'm going to take all of those, I'm going to hold shift, select all of them, and then I can group them, right? Not clipping mask, group from layers, right? So we can group them together, we can call them trees. We can also apply everything to them, and we can turn them off all at one time, right? So that's really nice. However, to apply something to them, we do have to select all those layers again, but it's nice because they're in one spot. So I do want to change them. I don't like how light they are, for sure. I wonder if I can apply it to all of them. No, it doesn't look like you can. And actually, something seems to be off about them. It won't let me apply to all of them. However, I might need to make them into a smart object, so let's right click, convert to smart object. Nice, now it's all one object. That I do in fact have to blending option again. That's okay. But yeah, at least now you know that you can do them all together. Anyway, I also need the shade and shadow for them. So that's really easy because I just have to pick a direction, right? So I'm actually just going to copy this layer. So Command C, V, right? We're going to make a copy of it, and it's going to be the shade and shadow of this tree, right? So we'll say, nah, it's not like a super sunset day, so just a little bit of shade and shadow, right? We'll take that one, I'll call it shade and shadow, trees. And I guess the reason I'm doing the shade and shadow first is so I know what kind of color to put it as well. This is obviously something I'd want to make black and white, so image, adjustments, and black and white. Because after all, our shade and shadow, does anybody know what color a shadow is? Is it though? It's like a dark purple, actually. It's like a really nice, smooth violet. But yeah, most of the time, like in elementary school, they probably taught you that, oh, all shadows are black, right? All asphalt must be black. The sun is yellow, right? The sky is blue, right? A lot of those things that, you know, we kind of take for granted sometimes. But yeah, that's starting to look like a pretty nice shadow for this tree, right? Now, it's looking kind of dark and mysterious, so I'm going to actually erase a bit of it. So I'll get the shade and shadow, right? Make this a little bigger. And we'll get rid of some of, obviously, the piece that we don't need, right? So I'm just basically getting rid of the inside of that tree. Now I could blur it out too. I don't necessarily have to like work on this really hard, right? Because I could just go like that, right? Get it to the size of the tree. Just kind of stamp it out. I probably wouldn't want that little bit of light in there though, right? Oh. See what I did there though, guys? Pretty nice, pretty quick. I mean, honestly, I'm going pretty slow with it, but yeah, now we got shade and shadow of our trees. However, that should be labeled trees. Oh, cap lock on. Let's go ahead and dial that back a little bit, because we don't really want them to overpower the architecture of our drawing, right? I would even go as far as like, you know, 42%. Not bad, right? Starting to look definitely our own. I made those shadows myself, right? It almost looks like, man, what did this person do? They're using both their analog and their digital. Even though you guys know very well, I just kind of made this up, right? This situation. Let's see. More so than that, right? We might need some material. We might need to actually change the color of maybe a certain building. So we don't necessarily always need another object or something from the internet to put there. However, we can, right? We could put cars, we could put people sort of walking, they'll have some shadows and things like that, right? But we can also put more information, right? So let's go ahead and do that. For instance, these buildings, you know, maybe I forgot to actually engage with them, and maybe I need to color them in, maybe signify what they are or something of that sort. So I can go back to my vector smart object, which is my lines, right, that I've locked. So I'll unlock it. I'll use my magic wand tool and basically get those selections. So I held shift so that I could keep those connections. And if I don't have a buildings layer, I guess I'll make a buildings layer. Oh. Buildings. Perfect. I'll put that on the top because I do want it to be above the grass. So, but the brush tool is actually really useful. It works really well, and it's actually a pretty convincing brush. You know, once my screen share starts working, there we go. There we go. Something a little bit more palatable. But yeah, usually I like to keep my brush hardness at 0% and actually fuzz it in a little bit like that. That fuzziness is going to help you make it look at least more realistic, right? A little bit of air goes a long way. Do you guys see that? Maybe not so much actually in the projector, but hopefully in the recording. That's also way too black. So let's do something more like dark gray. Right? See how I'm going one direction though? I'm treating it as if it was still a marker, right? So I'm not just filling it in all wacky doodle, all crazy, right? Same thing that you wouldn't do with a marker, so why would you do it here, right? But yeah, let's fill it in. Not bad. Now I got some buildings. Of course, I think those buildings might need shadow too. However, I don't want to do that all over again. So I'll deselect it. I can really get everything except my, I can turn everything off, which is also really nice and useful sometimes. So I could just focus on those buildings and make the shadows for them. Now they may have very specific shadows, so I did want to show you a different way we can make shadows. We can do them by hand, right? So shadows. And let's go ahead and actually draw those. Right, in my case, I know that I chose this 45-degree angle. I want to choose the same angle, obviously, as the trees, right? There's not two suns going on. But we can fake it till we make it, right? General shadow. We'll say that it's, that might actually cut off the page, so it doesn't really matter. But basically, I'm just holding shift. The shift also gives us that 45-degree angle, which is nice. I'm going to go ahead and hold shift again so I can add to my selection. And basically do it for this building as well. Again, just faking it till I make it. And just drawing the shadow part, right? So I got to trace the building a little bit. And like I was mentioning before, a shadow is kind of this darkish purple. So I actually want to go to the purple and just go to a very dark purple. Brush tool, which is the letter B. Brush that in a little bit. And again, a shadow is usually fuzzy, so I do kind of want that fuzz in there, right? Again, I'm trying to make it look more human, right? So I kind of want, don't get me wrong, I know I make it look really easy just kind of putting airs in there, but it's taken some time to be air-centric, right? I know that's not a word, but we're getting somewhere with that, right? It's starting to look a little bit more realistic because there is air. And let's face it, nobody's actually going to focus on those airs. They're going to start to see that blend into what they're looking at. Right? However, that's a pretty dark shadow. So as we know, shadows are usually kind of transparent. Oh, there we go. Awesome. Can bring back other things into play. Turn everything back on. Of course, not those. Let's just delete those. It's really weird. The delete button, delete layer is right next to duplicate. I think that's just genius. Yes. But yeah, now we're starting to get somewhere. Let's get our trees back. There we go. Yeah, not too shabby. We've already covered really the scaling of stuff like that. Maybe I wanted to colorize this grass even more. I don't know about you, but Texas grass is really yellow in some areas. So actually, maybe I want to remove some of the grass from what these locations will actually be and kind of show them in a more realistic light. So again, I'll use my brush tool. I'll get that yellow that I'm looking for, kind of an orangish yellow, right? Maybe it's kind of a grayish yellow, poopy color. I'll take down my flow, right, and my opacity, just to kind of show you what it does. It's more like a blurring, right? I kind of want some air in there. So I'm just applying it to my grass layer too. Okay. Of course, I really want to stay in this boundary, so I can do that. And it basically tells the computer, hey, stay in this boundary, right? So when I hit brush again, it doesn't go outside of it, right? Very useful tool. Maybe I want a little more darkness around this. But again, we're just making it look, honestly, a little bit more like our own, right? Maybe I don't want to get the street involved. Usually I like to dark my corners more like a vignette. It's the oldest trick in the painting book, right? I can change up my shape a little bit, right? Maybe I actually want a really big spot in there. Something like that. Maybe I want to kind of get a whole area, if you will. Not bad. Definitely looking a lot more realistic. And guess what? If I didn't talk so much, it only takes about 30 minutes, right? But again, kind of just the trick of the trade, but you may have noticed my lines are starting to kind of fade away, right? So one thing that we can do is take our lines and put them at the very top, you know, just to kind of solve some things, right? It does make it only a very slightly, and there's probably no way you saw that, at least in the projector. Let's try something else. One of the tricks that I know is actually to just duplicate it multiple times. Right? Obviously that's going to engage, so we'll have to take that a little bit. But long story short, we can definitely still even add all of these different things to it. So like brightness and contrast. Maybe if I wanted to darken those lines a little bit, right, I could. If I wanted to brighten them, add more contrast versus less contrast. And there's probably only a slight difference. Yeah, I can even tell in the projector. But yeah, fair enough. What's even greater about this is, okay, now I've got my image. Maybe I actually, man, I want to put text in here. Should I put text into Photoshop? No, not usually, right? Because it is a rastered program, and I want my text to be crisp and clear and perfect. I don't want them to be pixelated. And of course, I'll show you what I mean. Now, it does have a text tool, right? And if I put that text in here, you know, it's going to give us Pig Latin real quick. Oh, unless I hit spacebar. Right, it's going to give us, you know, kind of a decent shot. However, when I zoom in, look at that. Do we want that? Hell no, right? We don't want pixelated text. Right, so actually what we would do, we'd go ahead and delete that and just not put any text on it. No, I'm just kidding. We'll take it actually back into our Illustrator program, right? So let's go ahead and file, save as. Nicely enough, this didn't used to be a thing, but Photoshop now has a Photoshop PDF that works like a PDF. So that's really nice of them to do. It's about time, honestly. We'll put it in Rotation Bohuslav. We'll go ahead and save it. Save PDF. We can also do a high quality print or smallest file size. That'll come into play, especially when you get your portfolios and you're like, holy crap, this image alone is 150 megabytes. What do I do? Smallest file size. Right, is the way to go. And actually it makes it literally 90% smaller, so very nice to have. But in our case, we're not going for file size. We'll go with a high quality print. It's looking nice. I love that little burn there. Love it. Anyway, let's get rid of these trees and let's open Illustrator, because I do want to talk a little bit more about what we can do in Illustrator, and we'll conclude it with that for today. We've got about 16 minutes left. Going to take at least 15 to open Illustrator. Any questions so far, guys? Anything maybe you were hoping I would cover specifically, maybe? Or yes, absolutely. All right, now that Illustrator's open, let's go ahead and check it out and open that file. Just so I don't get confused, you know, I like to honestly close my programs. Usually it's a lot easier on my computer as well. Don't really need those trees. Of course, I'll save my drawing. Good thing I saved it as a PDF also though. Right, but again, I want to keep that Photoshop file so I can always change those layers or get rid of layers or change something that possibly my studio professor doesn't want. Or client, right? Let's go back to Illustrator. We could use our original file and just sort of put it on top of there. I mean, not the end of the world, but at least for this, let's go ahead and create a new file if it'll let me. There we go. Not pixels, inches. Let's go with specific inches. Let's say it was 11 by 17. And I would say, for the sake of at least our drawing, guys, at least 11 by 17. Right? So whether it be your site analysis for your turn-in, that's awesome. If that's what you want to pin up, great. However, if by next Friday you realize, no, I kind of want to do it with an elevation or a site section, that's fine too, right? Because we can use these same tools to, of course, do an elevation. The only thing I haven't really taught you is how to make a sky in the background, but it's essentially like I did the road, right? We kind of slip it in there and erase what we don't need. But, you know, maybe we get to that next week if we need to. Anyway, let's get an 11 by 17, create. That is our piece of paper. So let's go ahead and file place. We don't have the embedded option here because, well, we actually get it right here once we drop it in. So we'll go to my desktop, rotation 1, PDF, I'm going to assume it's that. And it's even going to put it to the right size. So as long as I had 11 by 17 there, nice. Right, it's going to lock into place ever so nicely. But this is actually where we want to put our text. So, you know, I can even call this an image layer. And again, always be organized. So I'm going to go image. And I'm going to say text, right? So this is where I can start thinking about, and let's just actually go ahead and lock that. Perfect. So let's go ahead and make some text. Let's make sure it's actually on my text layer. So all you have to do is, of course, click on it. Works a lot like Photoshop, but honestly, a lot better tools and a lot more things that we can do, to be frankly honest, with text in Illustrator. Right, so maybe I need a title of some sort, so I'm going to just put title. Obviously I don't want it that big, so I'm going to go to my settings up here. I'm going to use one of my favorite fonts. What's nice is it even changes it in real time, which it did not always used to do that, that's for sure. I want to use something more sans serif, more architectural. You guys know what sans serif means? Right, it doesn't have all the freeliness on the text. Go to 1001 fonts for free. Right, type that in Google. There's a whole page dedicated to literally free, wonderful fonts. Now, unfortunately, you can't do that on the school computer, but you can, of course, on your personal computers. That's looking pretty good. I'll take it. What's nice is I can hold Control on the Mac, right, and I can make a copy. It's Alt on Windows, right? If I hold Alt and drag out of an object, I can make a copy of it, right? I can also draw lines to something. So this is the only time I will allow you to draw lines to something, is of course either with a line tool, right, or a pen tool. Right, so in our case, I don't want to use the brush. My bad, it's in the wrong spot. There's my pen tool. Right, I can hold Shift and I can click on something such as, I don't know, this tree. Right, press Enter. And what's cool about this is, specifically with that line, I can even add an arrowhead. Right? Uh-oh, wrong side. That's okay. Right, switch it. But we can add arrows, we can make dash lines. So for instance, I can take this line, I can make it dashed. Right? How cool is that? But honestly, a lot easier to do in Illustrator. Another thing that could be said is, look what happens when I zoom in. That's pixeled because, well, it came from Photoshop. Look at that bad boy. That is a perfect rectangle, right? So, of course, using the programs for what they do best. Now, it's not my fault. I'm not Adobe. One day, don't get me wrong, I bet you $100 each that one day they're going to put all these programs together. They're going to call it Adobe, right, or something. But right now, they're completely separate programs, so we have to kind of use them for what they do best, right? The vector programs work really well for text and lines, right? And making line weights and those kinds of things, whereas Photoshop is really just for pixelated images. It's for rasterized imagery. However, like I said before, it does take at least some lines so that we can work with them, right? It does convert it now, so that is useful. However, I think you can see the potential of putting this back in. Another thing that could be said is, well, you know, maybe this is a situation where I actually want to show the site as well. So there's other cool things we could do. Let's say I could even get my Google image and put that right in there. For the sake of this, I'm just going to get a picture of San Antonio and stick it in there for some reason, right? You know, why not? Let's put the Riverwalk. It's beautiful. Why not? Right, so save as. I guess I can copy image too, but I'd rather save it. Desktop. And let's go ahead and place that in there real quick. Just called raw image. Is it super duper 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 small? Weird. Would have thought it was a lot bigger than that. Anyway, let's zoom it out a little bit. But maybe I also am like, man, that looks lame. I don't want rectangles. I want a cool shape, right? Like a circle. We could do that, right? So I can put a circle over this. I can move it to, wherever I need to. I also held shift so that it wasn't like a oblate or anything like that. I'm gonna flip the fill to 0 and the outline to, I don't know, red, right? Why not? I can take these two images, right? So I highlight them both, I right click, and I do make clipping mask, right? And it's actually gonna clip whatever I do, right? Nice. Can make an arrow to pointing exactly where I want it to point. And again, it is part of the composition now, so I don't want it to be actually too close. I don't want it to be off. I do want to give sort of enough white space, right? So we kind of maybe have to remember back to design 1. All right, I'm going to draw a line for myself. I kind of want to connect those. Unfortunately, when you draw a line, it's kind of weird. It's honestly hard drawing in Illustrator. See, it's exactly what I'm talking about. The line tool makes basically one line. That's why, of course, I prefer the pen tool. Because it's more like a polyline function, but let's say that was the road, right? Maybe that's what we needed. I'll press enter, go to my stroke. Don't really need it to be a dash line, but why not? And I don't know, let's go with a white pointer. Awesome. How professional does that look, right? But look what we're doing here, right? There's a lot of things going on. There's something that shows that, honestly, when you see something sketchy in a drawing, it implies that it's still roughed, right? We're in school, we do not produce final drawings. We produce final ideas, right? A final drawing is something that is used to make a construction, right? Don't get me wrong, you're gonna get there one day, but that's more like in your bachelor's and your master's program that they're gonna really show you how to teach. And of course in like Tech 1 and Tech 2, right, you're starting to look at details and things like that. We're not doing that. We're showing an idea and we're making sure it's palatable for somebody who doesn't understand usually reality, right? So our trees are usually representing trees. Our roads are representing roads, and so on and so forth, right? So very realistically, we have these kind of realistic cartoons, right, to say the very least. However, it doesn't mean we can't add reality, and it doesn't mean we can't blend technologies, right? Doesn't mean we can't have mistakes, right? Or things look perfect and yeah, there's a little bit of mistake there. That's way too big, by the way, but we'll keep it like that for today. Learn something new? Sweet. I'll leave it like that for today. And like I said, just to kind of cap it off, I'm looking for something on Monday, right? Whether it be your site plan analysis, right? And maybe it's a revamp of that and you want to use it for the final and you're going to put your final design in there. Awesome. I would say that's probably what I would prefer. However, if you want to make it your own, you have a section in mind, right? You have a precedent study or you have a site section that you want to show off. By all means, let's review it Monday. That way I can either go or no, right? In your favor, right? I don't want to set you up for failure, right? So essentially, I'd like to do some sort of pinup on Monday, guys. Probably maybe at the end of class, right? Rather than kind of the normal beginning of class that we've been doing. So let's do that one at the end of class. Sound good? All right. Any questions about Illustrator or Photoshop? Anybody want me to do something again? Sure. So you'll have to, I would just put that image in Illustrator. However, you'll have to export it as an AI file, right? So did you link that file though? Like what I'm saying is like, why wouldn't you just place the image in Illustrator? Right, and then scale it back to whatever that box that you created, right? Here, let's go over it. It's a good question though, right? Basically, Alex's question was, I have an image in Rhino that I've scaled, and it's not showing up in Illustrator, right? And to be honest, it could be a few things, right? But I would imagine it's probably something to do with the exporting. So you said you did it as an AI file? Okay. So let's double check that. I have this tiny dino that I've been working on. Let's use that real quick. It's adorable. You guys familiar with the TikTok GIFs? There's this one called a tiny dino, and I've stumbled upon ever since I sold my rain stick idea. So I'm always just coming up with other ideas, right? But it's quite popular, to say the very least. But let's say that was my image, right? Or let's put a picture in here to be at least more relevant. What image can we take? Let's say it was maybe our PDF that we used. I can't put a PDF in Rhino. Where's an image? Grass image, there we go. Our dinosaur is on grass. There you go. Awesome. But let's say that I needed to put this into Illustrator like Alex was saying. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. File, export selected. And I just kind of actually want to see what kind of options are in the Illustrator, right? So if I click on options, export viewport boundary, order layers, always use these settings. I don't see anything that sort of says take the imagery with you. But let's go ahead and let's try it out. Desktop, go, export, preserve model scale, I guess. You can always scale it to fit artboard. It's going to essentially make 2D whatever that dinosaur is too. And let's go ahead and try and open it in Illustrator. I haven't actually run into this problem before though, so you know, of course that's why I'm kind of just testing it. Dear Lord, it's either really huge or really small. Nice. That's that little tiny dino from the top view. And it's definitely freezing my program. But you're right, it doesn't look like the image is there. However, my solution, Alex, what I would do, you see how it's made this bounding box around it? I would fill that in with your own image. That's how I'd get around it. Right, so make sure you kind of get both of them then. Right. Yeah, that's what I would do. Just because my computer's starting to freeze up. But yeah, it even gives you the center point too. So you almost couldn't go wrong. I feel like there's a way to get the image in though. It wouldn't hurt to do a Google search for that. What I would search is Rhino to Illustrator, images not going over, right? In fact, I guess we could do that even right now. Rhino to Illustrator images. There you go. There's a whole YouTube video on it. So, yeah, definitely worth looking into. And we'll go ahead and end the recording there.